Thank you for inviting us to come and speak with your class today. We're very grateful to be here. We're from the Adoption Option Speaker Panel, and we're very grateful to be here today to talk with you about the option of adoption. We know that adoption is a very often overlooked option in our culture today, but today we want to share with you the truth about adoption from a lot of different perspectives. We have several speakers today. They come from different backgrounds, from different experiences. Oftentimes people think adoption goes one particular way, but there's a lot of different backstories to adoption, and we'd really like to share those with you today. We love questions, so please feel free to ask questions. We really like to engage with you as students, and we are just looking forward to a good conversation with you today. Just enjoy today, and please ask questions. There's no dumb question. The only dumb question is a question not asked, so please feel free to let us share our expertise with you. The Adoption Option Council has created a book of adoption stories that I'll pass around and share with some of the students. You can take a look at these. These are real life adoption stories, and we'd just like you to see adoption from a perspective of many different people. So thank you so much for letting us share with you.
Hello, my name is Hal, and I'm the adoptive parent in the group. So I'm going to share with you really what the process is, the adoption process is from the adoptive parent's perspective. Like a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people, my wife and I came to adoption from infertility. So prior to choosing adoption, we went through 3 years of medical treatments and other avenues to try and build our family biologically or the more typical way. And none of that was working for us. We had a lot of trouble getting pregnant. We had more trouble staying pregnant. And one day, or so it seems, one day we decided, this is more about parenting and becoming a mom and dad than just getting pregnant and giving birth. So that's when it sort of clicked in our brain that maybe adoption was the way for us to build our family. So from a process perspective, what we did first and what a lot of people do first is visit a bunch of adoption agencies. So we went to 3 or 4 agencies in the Twin Cities, and you do that for a couple different reasons. One, they're there to educate you about adoption. So there's tons of different ways to adopt. There's international adoption in tons of countries there. There's domestic infant adoption, which is what we did. There's adoption through foster care. There's really tons of ways to adopt. So you go to the agency to learn about all these different ways, and then at the same time, you're sort of feeling out these agencies to try and figure out which one is the right one for me. Which one do we want to work with that we trust, we're comfortable with the fees that they charge and their process and people and everything else. So you choose an agency, and after that, you go through what's called a home study process. And there's a couple steps to that process. The first is you fill out a huge stack of paperwork. We had to document, where have we lived the last 10 years because they do background checks on you. We actually had to get fingerprinted. You document your net worth, your tax returns from the prior year, tons of questions you answer like, what was your childhood like? What's your relationship with your parents and your siblings, your spouse if you're married? Really trying to build this portfolio of, who are you? And ultimately, they're trying to decide, are you ready to parent, as much as anyone can be ready to parent. So you fill out this paperwork, they read it, and they fill out their own reports, and then they come to your home, and they talk to you, and they ask you questions, follow-up questions for maybe what they read. You can ask them some questions. They may look around the house or apartment or wherever you live, all trying to figure out, again, is this family or is this person or couple ready to parent? In our case, we were approved to adopt, so that was great. After you go through that and you're approved to adopt through the home study process, you create what's called an adoption profile. And this is really your way to communicate with expectant parents who are looking to make an adoption plan. You're really laying out, who are we? What are our values? What do we enjoy doing for fun? What's our family like, our friends like? What are our careers? You're sharing a lot of information about yourselves because ultimately this document goes in a binder or on a website or both, or maybe it's a YouTube video or whatever else, a Facebook page nowadays. And this is what expectant parents will look at to get a feel for you to see, hey, is this the family that I want to place my child with? Because the way the domestic infant adoption process works is that the expectant parents choose the adoptive parents. Now, ultimately, both sides need to be comfortable with each other and make sure it's a good match. but it sort of starts out from them looking through this document and figuring out, yeah, there's something about this couple. I want to meet them or talk to him or talk to her and get to know them a little bit better. So in our case, we had a match meeting with the expectant parents that chose us through this process. And the match meeting is sort of what it sounds like. You talk face to face, there's social workers there, you get to know each other, you ask each other questions, and you sort of start to figure out, is this a good match? Is this something we want to move forward with? In our case, we match with our children's birth families within a few months of being approved. But it could take 6, 12, 18 months. It could take 36 months for some families. So it's really, it's sort of like dating, but not really. It's sort of like looking for a job and not really. You're just trying to make a lot of connections and figure out what's the right opportunity for me. And both sides are trying to do that. So we had our match meeting, we had a match, and then you're sort of continuing to get to know each other, waiting for the child to be born if he or she is not born yet. You're figuring out what kind of openness you want in the relationship. So after the child's born, how frequently are we going to get together? Or are we just going to send pictures and letters once in a while? So what's this relationship look like long term? We brought our kids home from the hospital a few days after they were born. We see their birth parents, every 3 to 4 months probably, usually at our house. So we have a very open adoption. It's been very healthy, just very positive for all of us. Our kids, they've always known they're adopted. We were probably talking about it when we drove them home from the hospital. We've read books to them and they see their birth parents all the time. So there's no secret. There's not going to be any letter underneath their door when they turn 18 years old that, hey, by the way, you're adopted. That's just not going to happen. People hide things because they're ashamed or embarrassed or afraid of something, and none of those things are really relevant for us for adoption. So there is no reason to hide anything, and we never would. That's really my adoption story. Do you have any questions?
Who named your children?
Who named our children? Good question. That gets asked a lot. In really both cases, it was a combination of us and the birth family. So the first name that the birth parents were calling the unborn child at the time is what we used for their middle name when they were born. So we made up the first name, the last name is my last name, and then the middle name is the name that they were calling them initially. But everyone does it differently. It just happened to work out that way. It was our way of really honoring and respecting what they were doing and their choices. And we all loved all of the names involved, and that's how it worked out.
How often do you see the birth parents, and what do you do together?
What do we do? We've gone to restaurants. Typically, we hang out at the house, our house. So we have them over usually for lunch. I always joke, they like to eat, we like to feed. So we hang out, have lunch, play downstairs for a couple hours, and really just catch up. They love just seeing the kids and how they're developing individually and how they're growing up with each other and how we interact with them. But I also just like hanging out with them and catching up on what's going on in their lives. They're family. They're good friends, family. So it's nice to see them.
How did you bond with your kids after the adoption?
Yeah, so bonding is interesting. I mean, I'm sure it's different whether you have biological children or adopted children, maybe. I'm sure it's different perhaps with men and women, so I'll just speak to me. With our kids, it took me, a month or two to really bond with them, and I think especially with Leo, our oldest, because that was the first time I was a dad, and our son was in his birth mother's tummy for 9 months, and they had a lot of time to bond during that time when I didn't. And it took me a while, I think, to feel confident in my role as a dad. And after a month or so, when I knew, hey, this cry meant this, and when he did that, it meant that he needed this. And when I knew all of that, and I felt more comfortable as a father, then I just felt more comfortable, and the bonding was there. With our youngest, it was probably more quickly than that, just because I was a dad already, so I had that confidence and picked that up pretty quickly. But it's different for everybody, but that's my story at least.
Hello, my name is Sara, and this is going to be my story with adoption. The previous speaker, Hal, and I are actually connected because he and his family adopted my son, Nate, who is now our son together. So I was 17 when I had just graduated high school, so I had just turned 18 when I found out I was pregnant. I was supposed to be leaving for the military in 4 days, so I had no time to figure out what I was going to do. I spent that summer debating whether I was going to keep my son and raise him on my own, or if I was going to make an adoption plan, and it was the hardest decision of my life. I actually didn't even meet with any families until about 2 months before my son was born, and I met with Hal and Julie probably a week before I went into labor. And immediately I knew that they were the family that I wanted to raise my son. They're amazing people, and it just clicked instantly for me. So my son was born a month later on February 20th, 2007, and the time that I spent in the hospital with him was very important to me. He was in the NICU for about a week because he was born a month premature. It was the hardest time of my life. I wasn't really sure where to go from there, but I knew that I had support in my family, from my friends, from Julie and Hal, from the people around me. So Julie and Hal took Nate home from the hospital, and we have a great relationship now. Our relationship has built over the years. Nate now he'll be 7 in February, so he's 6 now. He starts first grade this year, and I've been an active part of his life the whole time. He knows me as his birth mom, and he calls me Sara. He is a super fantastic little boy. He's not so little, he's a big boy. Way big for his age, but he's just an overall great kid. And adoption, I couldn't have asked for anything better. I was way too young when I got pregnant, in my personal opinion. Was not ready to be a parent whatsoever. I felt lost, but through adoption, I've kind of found my way, and I'm able to have a relationship with my son through adoption, and I'm very, very thankful for that.
What are you doing with your life now?
Now I'm in school. That's one thing that adoption has really given me back the opportunity to take back my life, as well as Nate have his own stable life. I'm currently working on a double major in marketing and biology with a minor in chemistry, and my plan is to go to medical school if everything goes according to plan. So really, he gets to be a part of that as well, and I get to show him that I have chosen to lead my life on the good path instead of let the adoption make and break who I am, because it is very difficult. It's something that I deal with every single day, but it's something that doesn't go away. You just learn to live with it and cope with it better each day. And I have a really great support system, so it works well.
What does your child call you?
Nate calls me Sara. And he knows me as birth mom, as I'm his birth mom. So he knows from the beginning who I am, and obviously age appropriate, that he's adopted, and so.
Do you ever regret your decision?
Never. It's a hard decision to deal with, but I never regret it, ever, because I love the life I have now. And every time I visit him and I see how happy and how stable he is, it just reassures me that any decision that I ever made regarding him and his well-being was the right decision. The family, Julie and Hal are amazing. His older brother Leo is just the goofiest little goofball, and they love each other so much. And to see those connections makes me happy, and it makes me realize that every decision I ever made for his well-being was the perfect right decision.
What did you learn about yourself through this process?
I learned that I'm stronger than I think I am. Obviously, like I said, this is something that I deal with every single day, and every single day have the strength to get up and to keep going. And some days it's harder than others, and there have been times where it's been hard for me to go visit Nate because I know that I have to leave again. But the older he gets, the older I become, the more strength I have to go on and to do this and to be a part of his life, and I'm just very thankful.
Can you get your child back when you're ready to parent?
No, I cannot. So the adoption plan that I made is finalized when we sign the papers. That's why it's really imperative that you have that connection with the family and they have a connection with you, because it's a lifelong bond. So they will always be Nate's parents. They will always be his mom and dad. They're always going to be legal guardians of his, and I won't be able to ever get him back, so to speak. But I'm sure as time goes on and he gets older, our relationship will be different. Not different, but maybe if I want to take him to a ball game or something like that, the older he gets, with age, our relationship will grow and mature.
Was it hard for you to decide to have an open adoption?
No, that was actually it never occurred to me to even think about a closed adoption. I always knew that I wanted to be a part of his life. And it's amazing because as a woman, immediately the day you find out you're pregnant is the day you begin your bond with your child. And that bond never goes away. The relationship I have with my son is different than a lot of other people who have their kids with them. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people who have never made an adoption plan will understand, which is kind of hard to deal with, but that's, yeah.
I'm Elise. I'm a birth mother and I'm also an adopted person. So I'll go over my birth mother story first. I was 19 when I found out I was pregnant. I was one of those teenagers that was in major denial. I really honestly didn't think it could happen to me. And so I hid my pregnancy. I didn't even probably realize till I was about 3 months along, because I didn't have a regular period, so I kind of didn't know. The birth father and I were not dating at that time, and I gave him my suspicion at the time, but we still kept it quiet, and months went by. By time my parents found out, I was 7 months along. I remember my mom sat me down one day. I came home from work and she goes, "Elise, do you have anything to tell me?" And I said, "Nope." She's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yep." And then she asked if I was pregnant. I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I haven't had a period for 7 months." I was very fortunate because I took care of myself. I ate healthy. I had no prenatal care. I had no doctor's visits. I had nothing. So I was very fortunate that I kept very healthy and did good. I unfortunately didn't have a lot of support. Once my parents found out, I was kicked out of the house. My mom did not want me living at home, so I went to go live with my aunt. So that was really tough. I was already in a really negative place. I hated life, I hated everyone, so being pregnant on top of it really didn't help things. My mom had asked me what I wanted to do as far as parenting or as far as making an open adoption plan. She had said right to me if I chose to parent that she wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. She made it very clear. So not that really influenced my decision, but I knew that I wasn't ready to be a mom at that point in my life. So I went to an adoption agency, actually the same agency that I was adopted through. My parents had actually recommended, and got some more education about open adoption. I had heard the term open adoption, but I had no idea what it entailed. So I just got more information about it and talked it over with the birth father as well. And he took some time to think about it, and we both decided that open adoption was the way to go. We ended up meeting Rod and Karen first. They were our first choice. We liked their Dear Birth Parent letter that Hal was talking about that they have to make. You kind of look for similarities in your own values and goals and things that you would want, someone raising your child. And so we met them and we really liked them. And after that first meeting, we actually asked them to be the parents. And we decided, they were honored and said yes. And so after that, we continued, we exchanged phone numbers and addresses. We started to build this relationship that we have today. We would go out to eat. They went to birthing classes with me. They were in the hospital when I gave birth. So it's been a really neat experience. My son is 17. He will be 18 in November. We have a very open adoption. In fact, yesterday I spent all day with him. We were at the state fair in the hot and humid weather. And then afterwards we hung out at his mom's house and hung out there and had dinner, and then I went home. But we've done everything together in the last 17 years. We've had professional pictures taken together. We've gone to concerts. We've gone to the state fair for the last 4 years together. I've had him sleeping over when he was 5 years old. So we've maintained this really, really close relationship. I'm very close with his parents as well. So they've been a great support system. So as far as adoption goes, being adopted myself, this really kind of, for my son, I think it helps that he doesn't have these unanswered questions that I will always have, and I will always wonder. I don't know who my birth parents are. I've never met them. I've never been to Korea. So I don't have a clue. So for me, every day is kind of an unknown journey, whereas Justin, we will be able to have, you know, those questions answered as far as on my part goes, because I maintain a relationship with him. So that's my story. Anybody have any questions?
How often do you see your birth child?
You know, it kind of varies. Now that he's older, he's got a car, he drives, you know, we'll meet up. Besides spending yesterday together, I'll call him up and say, hey, do you want to go see a movie, or do you want to go, you know, go have some lunch or dinner? And my guess is probably about every 3 or 4 months. Sometimes more, sometimes a little less, just kind of depending on what's going on for him. So.
Are you still with the father?
No, I'm not involved with the birth father at all.
Are you married now with kids?
Nope, not married, don't have any other kids.
Was it important for you that your son have your medical history?
Yes, it has. I've been through two really major medical things in my life. Something like I said, being from an adopted person, it's an unknown journey because I per se don't have a medical history. When I was 26, I was diagnosed. I needed open heart surgery. Not something I was expecting at the age of 26. So I had that, and I called up Rod and Karen and said, hey, just so you know, this is what's going on. It's not hereditary, but you might want to have them checked out just in case. Then 2 years later, I was diagnosed with a non-cancerous tumor in my skull. So that was a little scary. Again, called them up and was able to say, you know, again, it's not genetic, but you know, just keep an eye out. So in that perspective, medical-wise, it's been great. So I can let him know things that have come up in my life, to let him know what he could be prone to, since I don't, like I said, per se have a medical history. So.
How did you learn you were adopted?
You know, I think I kind of always knew, because my family is all white. I have 3 brothers that were all blood-born from my parents, so I knew I always looked different. I don't even know if my parents actually even really said to me, you're adopted. I think I just knew, because I knew I was different and I didn't look like my brothers or my parents.
Are you in contact with your birth parents?
I am not.
Do your friends ever ask you questions about it?
They did when I was younger. Just kind of asked, do I know them? Do I have any brothers or sisters? And I, you know, I don't. Because I've never met them, I have no clue if I have any brothers or sisters. They asked if I feel like I've been treated differently because I'm adopted. I think that's kind of a biased question, because sometimes growing up, I would be like, yeah, I felt like I was treated differently because I, you know, wasn't blood-born, and, you know, stuff that I was probably making up in my head. But I know I was just as loved as my brothers were.
My name is Allie, and I'm a pregnancy counselor. And in my job as a pregnancy counselor, I work with people who are experiencing an unplanned pregnancy, and I do options counseling with them. Most of the time, the clients that I work with are looking at parenting versus adoption, and they're wanting help and guidance and support through that process. It can be a very scary time for them, overwhelming. They're fearful, anxious, happy, sad, all these emotions all at once. And I am a person that can remain a neutral, objective. I can listen and ride that roller coaster ride with them. And help them sort through all those emotions. In the decision making, most of the time the people that I work with are looking at parenting versus adoption. So we'll do decision making tools, so to speak, like worksheets or workbooks that talk about, for instance, like baby items that they might need to get one time, like a crib or a car seat, or monthly things that they need to get, diapers, formula if they choose to use formula, clothing, toys, numerous things that they might need for a child. And so my goal is to kind of help guide them looking at that path in terms of what am I going to need in place to become a parent. A lot of times they'll have goals in mind for themselves, whether it's their short-term goals or long-term goals. So we'll go over those goals as well and see how they can achieve the goals still if they decide to parent. Hopefully they'll be able to maintain some sort of work towards those goals, even if it's not full force ahead. They can maybe still do little bits here and there so they can still feel good about themselves and obtain those goals should they decide to parent. Another thing that I can do for them is bring them to resource centers in the community, pregnancy resource centers or crisis centers, which offer many times like maternity clothing or free baby items for their child. Some even give monthly diapers and wipes to someone that's a client of theirs, and they take parenting classes and they learn about how to be a parent and do childbirth classes and stay connected with the life care centers to kind of better themselves and educate themselves on the aspects of parenting. They'll be able to be connected with them and get those items on a monthly basis. The services that I provide are free and confidential for everybody that comes and visits me. Most of the time, I worry that people that do come and talk about adoption as an option think that they're going to be forced into adoption as the option, or somehow steered in that direction, or just looked at as, oh, she went to talk to a pregnancy counselor, she must be wanting adoption. It really is not that at all. It's just looking at the options and knowing and finding out about the options that you have and educating yourself so that when you do that, make that final decision, you know that you looked at all options and you made the best choice that you did for that time in your life for your child. And my job is to support the person, and no matter what the decision is, and to remain that support person pretty much forever. If someone chooses to parent, I don't just say goodbye. I'll help them connect to resources, whether it's in the community or their county, and then they can come back to me as needed. And I have had people that have decided to parent, and then later on, after parenting, decided to make an adoption plan. So the door is always open for the client, no matter what the decision is. If somebody is looking at adoption, I'll help educate them on how adoption is different these days, how there is openness, how they're in the driver's seat. They get to choose the family. They get to decide what the openness part looks like for them. They can choose a family that lives close proximity to them so they can have, 3, 4, 5, 6 visits a year and still be involved in the child's life and still attend ball games and go to graduation and like the other girls talked about, take them on adventures and be part and be a wonderful, loving, caring, still kind of an extended family in the child's life. I also talk to them about what they want in a family, what kind of morals, values. Do they want someone that already has children in the home, or do they want their child to be the only child or the first child in the family? Do they want public or private school? Do any of those things matter to them because they have the say in the family selection? I also will help talk to them about the legal process of it, help guide them towards thinking about the hospital time and what they would like out of that. And then thinking about the grief and loss aspect of it, doing some anticipatory grief counseling about what they might expect to leave the hospital if that's what they choose, empty-handed without the child they carried for so long. It's a huge, huge decision, and probably the hardest decision somebody would ever make, and so kind of wanting to make sure that they have support in place. Sometimes I like to have people kind of jot down the reasons why they chose adoption when they're still pregnant, so afterwards they can go back and focus on that and reevaluate that. And they always have, until they sign consents and the revocation period is over, they have every right to change their mind, even if the child is placed with them in the adoptive home. So my main goal as a pregnancy counselor is to help someone experiencing an unplanned pregnancy sort through what their path might look like if they choose adoption or if they choose parenting. And no matter what they choose, I will be there to support them. So, does anybody have any questions?
What is the most common reason a person will choose adoption instead of parenting?
Most of the people that I work with will tell you that they're in a place, when they find themselves with an unexpected pregnancy, they're in a place where they just don't think that they're capable or able to parent the child at that time. And they might think differently if you flash forward X amount of years, but in that moment they're thoughtfully thinking it out, and they think that they can maybe achieve their goals and the child will have a more stable home if they do choose adoption.
Are birth parents usually involved in their kid's life after adoption is final?
Yes, they are. Most days, they're in the work that I have been doing for about 14 years, over 90% of the adoptions are open, and they stay and remain open throughout the child's life.
Do other family members sometimes get involved with the woman's decision about adoption?
I would say yes. A lot of times I feel the people that I work with get a lot of input from family and maybe even friends about what they should do or what they would do if they were in their position, but no one really knows what it's like to be in that position until you're in it. And while family and friends might, say they'll do childcare for you or they'll help financially, it's always best to kind of just look at it as you and that child and how you can succeed. And if they help you out, that's great, but I've found that sometimes they're not always able to follow through, and that I would never want anyone to feel pressured into making an adoption plan and then later regret it. But family and friends surely influence it positively and negatively, I'd say.
What is the difference between an adoption plan and co-parenting?
Open adoption is not co-parenting. Once the child is placed with the family and the adoption is finalized, it is like the child was born to that family, and there's no way to change that. Adoptive parents go through lots of training and education at adoption agencies around the importance of open adoption and having the birth family involved. To have a full identity for the child, biological information, health history, to have a complete picture of where they came from, and then to add a positive influence in the child's life and to be one more person to love them and care about them. But they don't have like custody stuff where they have visitation or every other weekend the child goes to the birth family. I do know that there has been times when the child is old enough to express interest, they will go out for outings or camping or something, but it's not the same as a co-parent or like if parents get divorced.